On SDC this week, we're talking about superpowers and whether a superpower should be the use of a password manager. Watch the video, you'll understand what that means. We're talking about Facebook Messenger under the cosh yet again for the potential risk to children using its platform and whether that's about to become even worse. And we're talking about Google and Chrome and data harvesting again. And there's a bit of a hidden warning in there for users of Apple devices and whether or not they're impacted.
Welcome to STC once more. We have a special guest this week, which is Jake Moore, who's a cybersecurity evangelist at ESET and used to be involved in digital forensics for the police. And we're going to kick off this week looking at passwords, that old favourite. Here's a question for you. How do you create your passwords, assuming you're not limited by character choice or character length, which some businesses still unfortunately do? New research analysing passwords from data breaches suggests that superhero character names are remarkably popular, with Loki used more than 150,000 times and Thor just a couple of thousand behind. Am I surprised? No. Am I worried? Yes.
Well, I think passwords are the bane of most people's lives. They want to get rid of them. They don't want to have lots of different passwords. They want ease of use. This is the security versus convenience battle all over again. And so people just go with the easiest way, and that's just to remember one password. But they've been told over the past few years, don't go and use your kids' names and your birthdays and your anniversaries. They can find it out on social media. So they've thought, I know, let's use a superhero character. But of course, they're still falling into the same trap. They're unaware of these incredible tools that attackers can use, such as brute force entry. It's not just attackers. I used to use that in the police force to get into phones and computers. They're easy to use and they're quick. And so people forget that there are other ways. You said there are 9 billion answers out there, but really there's only one answer, and that's a password manager. However much you might think, I don't trust that, you have to take that leap of faith and jump into a password manager. They can create the password for you and remember it for you, so you don't have to use your memory.
Absolutely. Here goes another statistic for you, a personal one. I've got currently 259 unique, separate, long, complex, random passwords. They're all over 25 characters in length, some well over 25 characters. And I can't remember any of them.
You've got Apple probably has done more than anyone in terms of trying to integrate, kind of the keychain password manager into everybody's use of its ecosystem. So where do you guys stand in terms of using Apple or taking a leap of faith and doing the same with Google and Chrome and stuff versus an independent third-party password manager?
I think it's a great start to go and use the device that you've got in your hand, especially at that time when it says insert a password. Do you want us to create one for you? That is better than going, you know what, I'll just go with my superhero name that no one else knows about. Of course, it's going to be better for that. But then what if you want to use multiple devices? You might have an Apple iPhone, but then you might have a PC, and that might not always be able to work cross-device. So a third-party password manager, in my view, is the safest and strongest way. Although people do worry about that one master password. They think that that's going to be found and that's it. You're just going to open up the vault with that special master key. But it's, of course, not like that. We talk about multi-factor authentication, biometrics, device-led biometrics to secure that entry only on the device that you've allowed. That, of course, secures all of your passwords.
And you've got to remember that not all password manager companies, or not all password managers out there, but the best of them, those businesses, those organizations are only involved in producing a password manager. That's all they do. That's their entire business model. They've got a big investment in getting that right. That's all they've got to worry about. They make damn sure it's secure. Other companies that are producing password managers, they've got other things to worry about as well. They can't put all their focus into a password manager. So I think if you look at password managers from that perspective, again, I think you can be pretty sure that they're safe. And personally, I'd rather invest my security in a password manager than leave it open to just one single platform.
Talking about securing stuff versus leaving it open, one of the things I'm looking at this week is Facebook Messenger, and it is under fire again from the child protection advocates and law enforcement agencies because of its plans, albeit delayed, to default end-to-end encrypt Facebook Messenger and by default Instagram's direct messages as well. The argument being that Facebook currently is able to monitor messages on its platform to look to flag, if you like, bad behavior, particularly where it concerns the interaction between adults and children, and to report that to law enforcement, and that problem or that ability will go away or be seriously diminished by the addition of end-to-end encryption to the platform, and whether that's necessary. I know, Jake, we've debated this before. I kind of, put my cards on the table, take a view that whilst a dedicated message like WhatsApp should be end-to-end encrypted, I think that's the right thing to do. When you mix messaging and social media, Facebook being the obvious example, but there are others like Snapchat or TikTok, where you have a lot of minors, a lot of kids on those platforms, allowing protective messaging between different people on that platform and people to peruse or browse the platform looking for people to contact. I think that's a dangerous recipe, but it's a contentious debate, right?
Well, I agree entirely that we're here to help protect people, and of course, especially children. And the police are doing everything they can to protect those, especially those at risk, those vulnerable children who may be targeted by people on the internet. But encryption is a very funny one when it comes to which line do we side with. We've got to keep the communication private for everyone, but then we also want to help out the police should they want to go and intercept. But these people who are aware of how these platforms work, they know which ones are encrypted and ones which are not. So if you say encrypt everything, then it reduces the risk to those people wanting private conversations. Now, criminals are aware of which ones are encrypted, which ones are not. They know the tactics used by the police. There are forums out there. I've seen these forums, and they know how to use the best tools for them. But this line, I must admit, we've got to keep with encryption of all conversations and all platforms involving messaging, because if we open it up to the companies themselves, it won't be long before they're just selling off our data. Well, they already are, sharing it, profiting from what we're saying, and we're going to get targeted with all sorts of ads and all sorts. It opens up far too much. So I say, yes, let's blanketly make everything we possibly can encrypted.
I've got a bit of a dilemma here, being the old man of the group. It means I've been involved in the security business now for close on 30 years. But it also means, in my case, I'm the father of 8 for my sins, and I've got 7 grandchildren. So I'm pretty invested in this whole child safety debate from a personal perspective. But with my security and privacy head on, I know how important encryption is. And I worry that if we start making exceptions to the end-to-end encryption rules, we say, will it become, or indeed it has become, the child safety argument will become a political remapping of the encryption is good for terrorists argument.
I think that's a really good point, but I'd look at it from a different angle. I think right now Facebook has grouped all of its messaging platforms into one potentially fully integrated backend that it wants to end-to-end encrypt. And I think the danger is if you run the argument that, and Facebook has admitted, as I think it said to UK lawmakers back earlier this year, that its expectation would be it would be able to flag less bad behavior with encryption in place. So it's admitted there's a problem, although it sometimes it denies it, sometimes it admits it, but clearly it's an issue. If you accept the fact that that is primarily a Facebook issue because of the number of young people on that platform, and you run it through, then the argument would be that Facebook would have to introduce some measures to allow additional monitoring or backdoors or something into its full messaging ecosystem. Now, my argument is different. My argument is, look, leave WhatsApp as it is. Let's take that risk, right? Because you're right. You know, if you are really up to no good, if we're talking terrorism or serious organised crime, you will find a way to hide your messaging, right? Let's be dead clear. You know, this stuff isn't getting plotted on Facebook Messenger, right? So if you put that to one side, but what Facebook does is it brings together the vulnerable with the potential bad actors, and that in a way that WhatsApp doesn't. Now, one of the things that you could do on something like Messenger is you could flag when a bad actor tries to move a discussion, a chat onto an encrypted platform. So my view is the risk is that if you do group everything together, you run a much bigger risk of weakening encryption full stop, including the signals and the WhatsApp of this world. And that's what we really need to protect.
It's a great argument, Zach. And I must admit, you nearly turned me in that. You deliver it well, but I have to side with Davey here. It's going to be leveraged as a political move. We don't want to always trust these big tech companies. They might say something and it might be all fluffy because PR have got behind it, but really there's an ulterior motive.
If we look at going back to what Jake was saying about trusting big tech and fluffy PR messages and backtracking on things, this throws us quite nicely into Flock again, doesn't it? With Google backtracking on Flock big time. And I think you've got some interesting things to say about Flock on your iPhone, Zach.
Yeah, you know, last week we talked about Google's very awkward backtrack, where in essence it had talked about eradicating those dreaded third-party cookies early in 22, and now that's delayed by, you know, potentially up to 2 years, because it can't work out how to balance the need of the advertisers with the privacy backlash that has kind of surged around everybody this year as people don't want to be tracked. And there's a lot of surveys that talk about people don't want this, what's called surveillance advertising. So they don't want to be monitored, to be sold products. That is getting a real head of steam at the moment. Now, separately, we've also talked about Apple's new innovations, including the private relay, which in essence is so it's been referred to as a VPN. It's not really. What it does is it breaks the identity chain. So it stops anybody, including Apple, understanding who you are and the stuff you're doing online. So it breaks that chain. So in essence, it prevents fingerprinting, your identity being monitored and mapped based on your online behavior. Now, one of the things that I'm asked a lot is, you know, what is is Flock on an iPhone? Is it an issue for iPhone users? Because Google's pretty quiet on who's impacted by this. If you are enrolled in the Flock trial, which is in essence the anonymization of your browsing behavior into groups of like-minded individuals that are then presented to websites. So if you're in it, you're not told by it. There's no opt-in, there's no opt-out. And that clearly impacts users on Chromebooks and PCs and Android. What about Apple's users? Now, Google has told me that it does impact you if you're on Mac. So you can be monitored using Flock on a Mac under this trial. But it's too hard to do it on iOS because of Apple's insistence on WebKit, which in essence is its web rendering engine, which manages the connectivity between the browser and the internet. Now, that's because they haven't done the work. Clearly, they could do the work if they move this thing forward. So I guess the news this week is you can relax if you're on an iPhone. You know, you're not going to be enrolled in Flock, but realistically, why on earth are you using Chrome on an iPhone?
The saddest thing about this is the majority of people, especially when I speak to them about it, is they don't care. I know we've discussed encryption, but that's something that can be given direction from government. There can be laws on forms of encryption on platforms. But when it comes to advertisers, there's this balance they've got to give.
We've lost the privacy battle years and years ago. Scott McNeely, 20, 25 years ago, who said that we need to get over it. I think he was right. We do. We need to get over it. We're only going to be able to do so much.
You're right, but you know, and if we were having this conversation 12 months ago, I'd be staying silent at the moment. I do think stuff's happening, and you know, it's never going to close the door, but it's going in the right direction. We talked before about Apple with its privacy labels, and now with things like private relay and, you know, curtailing mail tracking is doing the right things. For me, users have a choice that they didn't have before. You know, 12 months ago, we were not talking the same way around what Mozilla and Brave are doing, and DuckDuckGo and Proton and Signal. Look at the surge Signal saw, you know, tens of millions of new signups in January and February. So whilst you're absolutely right, you know, we're all profiled, we're all sitting in databases managed by data brokers and Google and Facebook and others. But actually, we can decide now how we want to use our devices and what data we want to share.